Hello, everyone. So I've called this talk Language, the Lurking Menace, How Words Can Make or Break Your Business. And I want to start with a little experiment. So this could go horribly wrong, but we'll see. So beneath your chairs, I really hope you'll find an envelope. If you can sort of reach under and pull it out, but don't open it just yet. It was really hard to get them under those chairs, by the way. It took us hours. Has everyone got an envelope? Okay, for those who just joined, if you grab a seat and then reach under and you will find an envelope. Okay, don't open it yet. Yeah. We've got one? All good? Okay, everyone's got one? Okay. So, what I'm going to ask you to do, on the count of 3, is just open the envelope, take out the piece of paper inside, and just follow the instructions. So not yet, I'll count in a moment. But just, we know who the misbehaving kids were at school. So just open it up and read what it says and do what it says. This is not a trick. If you understand, not yet. If you understand what it says, just do what it says, and that's the experiment. So don't second guess it. Don't be shy. Do whatever it says. It's nothing scary. Okay, 1, 2, 3, open. Okay. Great. Okay, now just observe what's happened. Okay, we've got a hand. It's a man's. Okay. And then once everyone's done the thing, just look around. Well, you'll notice that you're all in exactly the same position. So what I did there was I cheated because I gave you completely different instructions. So if you were sitting on this side of the room, you got that. Whereas if you were sitting on that side of the room, that's what you got. So I just thought what I would do was a bit of a demonstration of the power of language to have an immediate impact. If you think about all of the writing within your organizations, quite a lot of it, I've taken this to the nth degree, but a lot of it might represent more of this end of the spectrum than this. And what that means is every time you're sending out a piece of writing to people, it's taking them a lot longer to process it and to do what you want them to do. And if you think about the cumulative effect of that across an organization, in all of your marketing, even in your internal comms, your customer experience comms, everything, that's quite damaging to a business. And it's very easy to fix. You just have to write clearly, simply, and concisely. But this is a real menace, as I called it in the title, in the business world at the moment. So you walk around and you see things like this in the world. Pedestrian casualty reduction signal timings experiment. We've been showing this in presentations for years, and we still don't really know what it means. But we think it's something to do with they've taken the time between a red and a green light and either lengthened or shortened it to see what happens. But this does 3 terrible things. So first of all, it uses words that no one really uses in real life. It's kind of just really formal. It's for the grammar nerds in the room. It's 6 nouns in a row, which is a really bad way to get across your point. Also, I think the worst thing about it is the word signal, because what they're talking about there is traffic lights. And that's the word that we use in the UK. We talk about the lights or the traffic lights. We don't talk about signals, but people within the Department for Transport do, because that's their internal jargon. And someone within that department has gone, right, let's put this sign out. And someone might have gone, what about signal? Do people really say the word signal in real life? And someone's gone, no, don't worry about it, it's fine. And then they've ended up with this terrible bit of writing. And the third sin is putting pedestrian casualty and experiment in one sign. That's just a bad idea generally. And what this is down to is something I call the I know something you don't know effect. And to explain that, I'm going to take you all the way back to the Romans. Just as a case in point. So what happened was the Romans came to the British Isles. They encountered Celts who were speaking Celtic languages, and the Romans conquered, and therefore their language, Latin, became prestigious, and the Celtic languages became inferior. So if you were a privileged Celt, what you would do was you would learn Latin, because you needed to communicate with the ruling classes, and you needed it to further your own career and your life. So eventually, the worlds of religion and administration, really prestigious areas of life, ended up people who were writing any texts in those worlds ended up using Latin because these were prestigious areas that deserved a prestigious language. And also interestingly, the words administration and religion are both from Latin, and a lot of the language we have in the administrative and religious worlds, and others as well, comes from Latin. And what happened was, after the Romans then left, the privileged Celts kept using Latin because it showed their superiority over the less privileged Celts who didn't speak the language. So Latin persisted in the country for a long time. And that's the I know something you don't know effect. If you know a way of speaking that is prestigious and someone else doesn't, there's this real human drive to use it, even though it does not help understanding in any way whatsoever, but it makes you look good. And that's the thing that's behind a lot of businesses and the Department for Transport, which has a lovely building, it seems. A lot of businesses and organizations across the world. But what we do at The Writer is we try and fight back against that. We try to take this complicated, formal, dull writing that often comes out of organizations and make it these three things: more empathetic, more efficient, and more distinctive. A bit like this sign here. Which is about the most empathetic, efficient, and even distinctive language. You don't expect a road sign to say something like that we've ever seen. We didn't write it, unfortunately, but we wish we had. So for the rest of this talk, I'm just going to take you through those three things: empathy, efficiency, and distinctiveness. And then just a few rules on how you can try and embed a culture of better writing if you need to. So first of all, empathy. So this is about how nice you are to deal with. The buzzwords are around emotion and personalization, giving people a tailored experience. And it's about much more than just mail merging someone's name into an email, obviously. It's about getting to know your customers, what makes them tick, what language do they speak. And I just want to put up another sign that I think does this brilliantly. Here you go. So if you're a dog lover, you probably thought, oh, that's great, I love this sign. If you're not, if you're a cat person, maybe you thought this was a bit naff. But it understands its audience. The point of this sign is to get people who own dogs to clean up after their dogs. So it uses the language those people really use in real life. And also, interestingly, as you can see at the bottom, it's a bylaw, it's a legal bit of writing. So often when we go into an organization, they say, this is all great, but the legal team won't let me do this. If the legal team will let you do that, then making your language clearer, more empathetic is an absolute, it's going to sail through. Another example I like to show is this from Innocent Drinks. So this is someone at Innocent who deals with complaints. And if you try and ignore the yellow highlighted bit, which I can't fix now because it's an old document, and just if you look at the first sentence, which says, thanks very much for your funny email, but big apologies for your unfortunate Innocent experience. So this is someone writing to a customer who's complained, and they're saying your funny email. So someone drank an Innocent smoothie, thought it wasn't quite right for some reason, and then wrote to Innocent to complain in the Innocent tone of voice, in a funny tone of voice. And if that isn't the holy grail for any organization, to get people, even when they're really angry and complaining, to use a fun, friendly tone, then I don't know what is. And I think, you just can't be angry with an organization like Innocent Drinks because they've got such a great tone of voice, and it just makes them seem so fun and friendly and natural and all those great things. A story from our experience, we had a client who was running a year of operational excellence, and you went into their office and they had signs up all over the place, dangling from the ceiling, saying operational excellence. And we said to them after a meeting, we said, so is everyone operating excellently now after these signs? And they said no, not apart from one team. There's one team that's doing really, really well. And so we said, can we go and talk to them? And we went to talk to that team. And we asked the person who headed up the team what she'd done to make people operate excellently. And she said, well, the first thing we did was take down all the operational excellence signs. And the next thing we did was set up a weekly meeting called Doing Our Everyday Things Better. So what she'd done was just take the spirit of this which you ask people to do operational excellence, they don't know what they're meant to do. But you ask someone to do everyday things better, and they do. And it's just another example of the power of a slight tweak in the writing and the wording that makes people behave differently. We also do a lot of work with Cisco at the Writer. This is an example of some of their writing. Don't worry about reading it all, it's quite long and complicated. But they came to us because they had a problem of that people didn't understand what they were saying a lot of the time. And this is an example of why. You know, if this was a case study they were using about one of their clients, Coke. And you read that and you're not really any wiser as to what they've done. So what we do with them is take that sort of thing and turn it into more this sort of thing. So you're focusing straight away on what people care about. They want to cut costs, so say that right up front. That is in here, but it's somewhere in one of those lower bullet points. So that's just an example of the sort of thing that we do. And what we did with Cisco was we came up with a tone of voice for them, a set of guidelines, as well as a naming system, a way to do naming. We've trained 5,000 people, and we've done loads and loads of testing on rewrites like the one I just showed you. And when we did some of those rewrites on their website, bounce rates halved, click-throughs doubled, time up on page by a third. People trusted Cisco more, and people were more persuaded by their writing. So just going from that really lengthy, quite dull, unempathetic bit of writing to something that actually gets to what people are interested in, it's a very quick, easy win to go from that to that. And you can get some pretty impressive results. And we haven't done that thing of leaving off the ones where we didn't do so well on. This is all of the things that they tested. So that's empathy. That's just about getting into people's minds and writing to them in a way that they want to be written to. My next point is about efficiency. So this is just about how slick you are as a business, how smoothly your processes go, you know, how quickly you respond to people, how easy it is for them to get in and out of an interaction with you, generally without having to waste their time and so forth. Or to put it much better, readers are selfish, lazy, and ruthless. That's a quote from Jacob Nielsen, the web expert. And this is a really tricky thing for businesses to deal with. You're dealing with customers who are looking at everything you write with this mindset. And a company called Email Labs just did some research where they looked at how long people generally spend reading marketing messages. And they found that it's 15 to 20 seconds on average. But if you think about that, it's sort of 3 seconds absorbing the logo and the bits around it, and then 3 seconds reading maybe your headline, and 3 seconds when the cat does something strange out the window and you need to check up on it. So you end up with actually about 6 seconds to read the marketing messages that you get. So I want to do another experiment. I'm going to show you a sales email that I got last week. I'm going to give you 6 seconds to figure out what it's trying to say. Go. Okay, time's up. Does anyone have any idea what that was trying to sell me?
SEO?
Quite possibly. I haven't even read it, to be honest. Something about websites. So one of you got it, maybe you got it, we're not quite sure. So the point is just people are really rushed for time, they're pushed for time, so keep it short, get straight to the point. Someone who did a criminally bad version of this is Stephen Elop, Microsoft exec vice president, when he sent out quite a famous now redundancy email to employees. And this is it in all its glory. You won't be able to read it because it's quite long. But the point at which he gets to say thousands of people are going to be made redundant is there. So that's about 12 paragraphs, and that's about paragraph 9, something like that. And this is a real instinct that businesses, and we all personally have, I think, is when we've got bad news to give, we want to pad it out and get everything else out first, and then we get to the point and hope that they won't notice it. But you've got to say the worst thing people are thinking. That's a really crucial thing. And especially the more that applies even more, the worse news you've got to give. I'm sure there's a better way of saying that sentence. Another story from a company called NetApp. They're a tech company out in Silicon Valley, I think. Another little famous bit of writing, at least famous in our circles. I don't know how we're a bit nerdy about writing and we collect these things, but don't know if that happens elsewhere. But what they did was when they had to redo their travel expenses policy, and they could have done it the same way everyone does it. They could have spent 20 pages going over the same old stuff of all the reasons, all the things you can do when you're traveling, all the things you can't do when you're traveling. But what they did instead was they just kept it to 1 page and 3 sentences. We're a frugal company, but don't show up dog-tired just to save a few bucks. Use your common sense. So this gets a mixed reaction. Some people say, okay, I need the detail though. Other people say, well, that's great. That's all I need to know when I'm abroad. And it's late night. I've just arrived on a plane at 11 at night. I've got to talk at 7 in the morning. Obviously, I shouldn't show up dog-tired, so that means I can get a taxi. It's exactly what people need to know to get the gist of the travel policy at NetApp without all the detail. Another story from one of our clients, BT. So we do a lot of training. We've been doing a tone of voice program with BT for quite some years now. And part of that is, like I said, running writing training. So we go into a room with 12 people in it, and we stand up and we teach them all of the principles of good writing. And in one of those sessions, we had the person who was in charge of writing some of the call center scripts. And this was one of the call center scripts, or an excerpt from it. And what he did was, after our session, he went away and he shortened it to that. Says the same thing, it just cuts out the waffle and the bits that you don't need anymore. And what that did was it shaved 13 seconds off the call center script, and BT pay by the second. So the longer they're on the phones, the more money they're spending. And so cumulatively, that saved a huge amount of money. He then took that to his boss and said, we should rewrite all our call center scripts. They did, and the number is £6 million saved just from shortening up call center scripts, making them more efficient. So that's the hard numbers side of it. We also get nice quotes like this from some of our clients. It used to take me 2 bottles of wine to get through one of your reports. I got through this one in under a glass, which is great for us and terrible for the wine industry. The last of the 3 buckets of what we do is distinctiveness. And this one is a bit more mystical and magical and difficult to pin down with statistics and so forth. But we subscribe to the Byron Sharp School of Thinking on distinctiveness. So he works for the University of South Australia. He wrote a book called How Brands Grow. I'm sure a few of you have read it. And in it, he talks about physical and mental availability. So by physical availability, and sorry for those who have read it, I'm just going to briefly recap. Physical availability, and I'm probably going to butcher this, how available your products are on the shelf, basically. Do you take up the whole shelf? Do you have a system that means that they're being replenished constantly? That sort of thing. Mental availability, from a writing point of view, is the more interesting one. It's about how likely someone is to think of your brand when they're in a buying situation. And Byron Sharp and his team talk about distinctive assets as being the way that you build your mental availability. So Nike, they've got a famous trainer, they've got a famous endorsement, they've got a famous strapline, famous logo. Everything there is the same colour. It's all the Nike black and white. And what they do is they have all of these distinctive assets, and that's all building their mental availability, keeping them in people's minds. But what Byron Sharp doesn't really talk about in his book is the language side of it. And we think that language is your logo. Language can be just as distinctive as your logo is. And I'll just go back to innocent drinks as well. They're the go-to example for any tone of voice talk. Here they are talking about pebbles as one of the ingredients in their smoothies, and then saying they lied about the pebbles, which is great. But just if you think about innocent drinks, would they have been the company they are today without their unique take on language? I don't know that they would. I think people go to innocent drinks purely to see the funny messages on the bottom of the bottles. And without it, maybe they would have just been another juice brand. Another example, this is a coffee table that's available in Homebase, coffee table Oak Effect. This is a very similar coffee table available in IKEA. This is a much more distinctive one. You probably would have guessed that it's an IKEA table just from their distinctive name. And the last example I want to show you is just this, which is one of my favourite bits of advertising. Someone in the media department got a right old telling off for this, I'm sure. But what I really like about it is that you can tell what each brand is about just from that one sentence. So you can tell Stella is they're trying to be luxurious and they're trying to be premium and all that stuff. And you can tell exactly that Newcastle Brown is exactly the opposite of that. No nonsense. And that's great. So that's 2 really strong tones of voice coming through. I think Newcastle Brown won on this occasion, but still. So like I said, this is a tricky one to pin down numbers-wise, to say, we did this and it got this impact. But we have put it to the test. So we work with Nielsen, the research company, and a well-known skincare brand. And we took a bit of their writing about a product. So it was just a product description. And we rewrote it in two ways. So one in the brand's tone of voice, and one in a neutral but good writing tone of voice. So eventually we put into test 3 versions. So the original version, the tone of voice version, and the neutral good version. And the really relieving news for us was that ours did better than the original in the testing, which was great. But the more interesting thing was that people who had previously called themselves loyal customers of the skincare brand preferred the version in their tone of voice to the version in the neutral tone of voice, in a way that wasn't true across the board. So if for the people who didn't say they were loyal customers of the skincare brand, they liked the neutral and the tone of voice version exactly equally. But the people who were loyal said it was more different, more attention-catching, more relevant, had more of an advantage to the product, more credible and more worthwhile, even though it was exactly the same content, just one was in the tone of voice and one was not. So that's distinctiveness. So how do you do it? How do you actually go from, I'm sure a lot of you already have tones of voice or tone of voice guidelines, but for those who don't, and even for those who do, this is the way that we tend to do it. So first of all, defining your tone of voice is absolutely crucial, and that means not 3 words on slide 97 of your 300-page brand guidelines saying words like dynamic, human, and trusted. We see those quite a lot. Likewise, it doesn't mean a massive tome of tone of voice guidelines that dot every I and cross every T and go into style and things like that as well. What a tone of voice is, and what you're doing when you create a tone of voice, is you're starting off what we call, or what our client Richard from BT calls, culture change by stealth. So it's not about the guidelines, it's not about just a new way of writing, it's about a new way of thinking. And if you get a tone of voice out into the business, you can change people's minds about everything that they write. And again, the cumulative effect of that can be massive. But you've got to make them care as well. Point number 2, you've got to make people actually care. So once you've got some guidelines, even if they're the best guidelines in the world, you'll come up against people who just have no interest in it. So first of all, when you've got to involve people in creating the guidelines in the first place. That means running workshops with people from across the business. It gives you 2 great benefits. You get opinions from different, the legal team, finance team, everyone, because writing comes out of every part of organizations. But it also means that politically they feel involved and they feel ownership for it, and that means that they won't derail it later on, which is great. Even after that, you'll come up against mental blocks, and there are 4 or 5 blocks that we come up against and that we have to have the argument about over and over again. First of all, this one. A lot of people think they're bad writers. Hands up in the room if you think you're a bad writer or you think it's not close to your core strengths. Yeah. So there, and I'm sure, this is maybe a unique room in that we're in marketing and writing is more a thing that we do, but across organizations, there are a lot of people who think they're terrible at it. But it's like with maths. I think I'm a terrible mathematician, and that's just because at school I was the English person, and you kind of put yourself into these buckets. And I'm sure in the room we have the science people and we have the maths people, and you think of yourself in that bucket. But really, writing is something we all do every day, and it's something that everyone has the ability to do well. It's just that we're taught badly within organizations. We get all the wrong rules. We're taught to write in a formal way. We're taught to write in certain, you have your intro and then your method and then your evaluation and your conclusion. You're putting the main point last if you put your conclusion there. So that sort of thing is just crazy, and we're fighting against it every day. How about this one? If I write simply, I won't sound like an expert. This is something a lot of people think. Some nods in the room. Luckily, we have some proof that that's not true. So this guy, Daniel Oppenheimer, says Princeton. He's now at UCLA, I think. He did some research where he took 2 bits of writing, or he took a bit of writing and rewrote it in a clearer way, put both in front of a load of people and said, which is the more intelligent author? And overwhelmingly they said the author of the clear version rather than the complicated version was the more intelligent author, even though Daniel Oppenheimer was the author of both. So it was a total, it was a safe test. This one is a big one too. My boss won't let me. So people often come to training and then they go away and they think, well, actually, this is all great, but if I write like this, then I'm going to get told that it's just not the way it's done. So what we do there, we get very senior people to endorse the tone of voice guidelines. So this is Gavin Patterson from BT. He's in the tone of voice booklet that we created for BT, just to prove that, and he's everyone's boss, so it's fine. If he does it, it's fine. A lot of people say formal writing is just the right way to do it in business. But when was the last time you enjoyed reading something that was really formal and long and verbose? We're all very busy people. We need things to be short and engaging, whether we're in business or in our home lives. And lastly, all our competitors sound corporate. This is something a lot of people say, and that's a great reason to go the other way and stand out. The last thing I'll talk to you about, how are we doing? I'm a little bit over. So the last thing I'll very quickly go through is just looking at your language journeys. So look at all of the places in your organization where you have language and how it affects people. And there's a way that you can test it. This is called the Flesch-Kincaid Readability Checker. It's built into Microsoft Word. It was developed by the US Navy to make sure their manuals were clear. And essentially, it's just a good way of getting an objective measure on how clear your writing is. So if you get a 10, it's incomprehensible. If you get a 30, you're about Harvard Law Review. This is about the BBC website, and Dr. Seuss is about 90. Most people, there's no real good reason for being any lower than 50 on the readability checker. So a good way to check your writing and make sure it's as clear as it can be. So yeah, define your tone of voice, make people care about it, and look at the places where your language is most impactful. And that's it.
Thank you.